These are today's soap inspirations. We are going to make a honey oat soap using real honey and colloidal oatmeal. As if that isn't tricky enough, I also decided to create a coconut oil free soap. So keep watching to see how it all turns out. The first step is measuring out my distilled water and then adding my citric acid to that water. Water is super hard here in Calgary, so the citric acid helps with reducing soap scum. Kayla and I just got back from a long road trip out east where we saw our friends and my family in Ontario, and then we saw his family in Iowa and Minnesota, and it was awesome, but I came down with a bit of a cold, which is why my voice sounds like this, so I apologize if it sounds weird to you guys. I'm just recovering from a bit of a cold. I never worked with honey before, so I was pretty nervous. From what I've read, honey can heat up a soap very quickly and cause soap on a stick. We don't want that, so what I did was split up my distilled water evenly. I added my lye to one half and set aside the lye solution to cool down. With the other half, I dissolved my honey into. When using honey in making soap, I recommend using a raw honey without any extra additives. See how this honey is thick and opaque? Totally different from the clear, golden, gooey stuff you can get in those Bear Squeeze bottles at the supermarket. Read the ingredients when buying honey for soap. It should only list honey if it's raw honey. When I dropped this honey glob in the water, I totally had doubts that this would fully dissolve, but it did. After some stirring and pressing the honey against the sides of the container, it finally fully dissolved in the water, which was a relief. I set aside this honey water solution and waited until my lye solution dropped down to room temperature. Once it did, then I added my honey water to the lye water, causing this really cool color change. It then got super hot right away, so I decided to wait until this lye solution cooled back down to room temperature before moving to the next step. See how the temperature spiked because of the honey? We need to get that back down to the 80s. Soaping at this really high temp could cause all sorts of issues, so I just let it cool down and soap at room temperature. Okay, as if soaping with honey isn't a big enough leap, I also decided to soap with a completely new formula. I decided to try to make a coconut oil-free soap. Coconut oil and soap adds big fun bubbles, which I'm trying to replace with honey, as honey also adds bubbles. For the rest of the coconut oil's properties, I decided to replace that with palm kernel flakes. This, along with palm oil, made my soap very palm oil heavy, which spiked up my stearic acid content in the soap. The consequences of that you'll find out later in this video. While my Presto pot melts all that palm oil and palm oil flakes, I'm going to measure out my soft oils: olive oil, hemp seed oil, and castor oil. Getting a Presto pot was amazing. My oils melt so quick with this guy. I just set it at warm and oils melt super quick. If you want a Presto pot for yourself, which I highly recommend to speed up your soap making, I have it listed in my description box below. For scent, I'm using this bottle of oatmeal milk and honey sent to me from Fizz Fairy. This is a classic soap scent that literally everyone loves. Its warm, soft honey and milk scent is so soothing and perfect for fall. When I used to have an oatmeal milk and honey soap, I called it honey oat, but when I had a honey oat soap on my line, it had some diehard fans, and they were so upset when I took it away. And now that it's back, they better rush, because I am only making a few of these soaps, and hopefully they pick up a bar before they're all gone. But honestly, this scent is amazing. So now that the lye solution has dropped back down to room temperature, we can move on to the next step. In addition to honey, I also add kaolin clay and colloidal oatmeal. To make sure it's all incorporated, I use a stick blender to break up all of those clumps. Okay, here's where I add the lye honey water solution. Not going to lie, I was extremely nervous. I didn't know what to expect, but I was ready to throw it into my mold if things started to go sideways. As you can see, it didn't go absolutely bonkers on me. I didn't get soap on a stick, but it did begin to accelerate very fast, so I started to pour. I was really glad I kept my design super simple. So here it is, all poured. If you know anything about me, you know I love textured soap tops, so I made waves in the soap using a spoon. And as I was doing this, I noticed the soap getting progressively harder, so if you're going to attempt this exact soap, I suggest you move quick. For a finishing touch, I add my signature swirls and then top everything off with some oats. I actually don't love whole oats in soap. They're not that exfoliating and get a mushy, weird sensation in the shower when I'm using the bar. For decor on top of the soap though, I think it looks neat. So my thoughts with this pour, it definitely moved faster than I was anticipating, but I still managed to get it all into the mold. And I'm glad I planned a simple design because definitely don't think colors would have made it in this guy. Well, the thing is about oatmeal, milk, and honey soap, you definitely want to keep it more on the natural side since a lot of people associate oatmeal to sensitive skin, and also the fact that this fragrance oil will eventually turn the soap a little bit more brown than what you see here. All that works in the soap design's favor. So now I'm going to leave it uncovered and let it solidify overnight, over 12 hours or so, and then I'm going to cut it in the morning and show you guys what it looks like on the inside. So here's the soap the next day. It's a little ashy from a higher water content, but it still looks really good. Not sure if you noticed, but I added some string in between the silicone liner and the box to help me get it out easier. This didn't work as well as I wanted it to. Someone suggested in the last video I featured this box mold in to drill some holes in the bottom so I can poke the silicone out. I think I'll do that. But I eventually did wrestle the guy out and proceeded with cutting. I still don't have a slab cutter, so I pulled out my big kitchen knife to make some rough cut rustic soap blocks. After some cuts, I started noticing something strange. Oh no! Oh, looks like we got lye heavy soap. See how it's crumbly down at the bottom there? This is most certainly an indicator of too much lye. And I'm going to investigate further to figure out how this happened because I ran it through soap calc. Thinking this soap was lye heavy, I left it as it was and left for vacation. I'd written it off as a fail batch and looked forward to the rebatching video I would have to make in an effort to fix it. But something bugged me. I swear I'd added all of my oils and water at the proper amounts, so when I got back from vacation, I poured through my recipe and even video footage to make sure I'd included all of the oil I needed to. When all of that checked out, I looked at the ingredients themselves. Palm oil contains high palmitic and stearic properties. If my palm oil had melted and resolidified, there's a chance the stearic acid may have separated, causing the crumbly texture you see here. Adding too many additives can also cause this texture. I had honey, colloidal oatmeal, and kaolin clay all stuffed in this soap, and sometimes soap just can't hold it all. What it ended up being, though, may have been simpler than I think. Remember this big kitchen knife I used to cut it? Yeah, for my softer soap recipe, using this might have been fine, but for a slightly harder recipe, this decision may have been disastrous. This kitchen knife's triangular shape may have compromised the surface of the soap as I cut it. So 2 weeks later, when I returned from vacation, I decided to check out my soap again and cut it using a thinner blade like this baking tool. To my amazement, it worked a lot better. It still crumbled a bit, but it was nowhere near as bad as with the kitchen knife. I pulled out my soap wire cutter and my suspicions proved right. I cut through the soap extremely easily and perfectly with no unsightly crumbly sides. And this is after 2 weeks of the soap curing. So the soap technically should have been much harder, but it was still pretty easy to cut through. This is all to say the appearance of the soap is likely a combo of a slightly harder soap recipe due to a higher palmitic value, too many additives, and the attempt to cut it with a kitchen knife. I really should get a soap slab cutter. It's on my to buy list because I really like these soap blocks. This square soap block shape is super fun and I've gotten a lot of great feedback from it from my customers. Okay, but how does it perform? After 2 weeks, I thought enough time had passed for me to be able to test it and see if I was able to get a soap with decent bubbles using a coconut oil-free recipe, and here are the results. After working it in my hands a bit, I was pleasantly surprised to see a nice, creamy lather with some good bubbles. With high palmitic soap, the lather will always be creamier rather than bubblier. That's why shave soaps also have a high stearic and palmitic value, but I actually really loved this lather a lot. So I just washed my hands with this crumbly oatmeal milk and honey soap, and my hands feel amazing. They are not dry at all. They feel so good. And as you guys noticed with the foam that I got, it was really dense. The bubbles were really small. That's because there's no coconut oil in it. But it was a really creamy lather, and I think this might be one of the creamiest soaps that I've made. I don't know if these soaps are gonna win any beauty contests anytime soon, but I think in terms of functionality and performance, it's pretty high up there. It's really hot here in Calgary. Woo, I'm a little glowy right now. These also smell so good. Thank you to Fizz Fairy for sending oatmeal milk and honey fragrance oil. It's a classic soap scent and a huge favorite amongst customers. If you want to pick up a bottle for yourselves, I highly recommend it. There is a link to that fragrance oil in my description box below. If you want this recipe and steps, it's all on my Patreon, which is linked down below. And speaking of my Patreon, thank you to all of my amazing patrons, especially my Bubble BFFs listed here. You guys rock so much, and your messages during my vacation encouraging me to rest were so sweet and helpful. You guys are amazing.